US President-elect Donald Trump's pitch days before his inauguration for NATO countries to raise their defense budget to a record 5% of GDP has set the proverbial cut among the pigeons. For many allies, the proposition hits hard. Is Trump looking to make NATO an instrument to further American arms exports? Here's a report.
The US president-elect has long been a big NATO critic, even warning repeatedly that it was time for America to abandon the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. In his first term, Trump had hit out at what he saw as Washington being ripped off, vowing to make Europe take its fair share of the burden. This time he pushes the bar up firmly, more than doubles the present 2% of GDP defense spend requirement for NATO allies.
Well, I think NATO should have 5%, yeah. Well, you can't do it at 2. I mean, at 2%, every country, if you're going to have a country in a regular military, you're at 4%. I think they should be, they're in dangerous territory. I think it should be, they can all afford it, but they should be at 5%, not 2%. I'm the one that got them to pay 2%.
The warning to NATO allies echoes what Trump had said at a campaign event last year. Pay the bills or else. That's his theme.
Nobody said it but me. I took a lot of heat. They said, oh, that's a threatening statement. Well, they weren't paying their bills. I said, we're not going to protect you if you're not paying the bills. So, in a true sense, I saved NATO, but NATO's taken advantage of us.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte had spoken last month of the need to raise defense spending targets to 3% of GDP. Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 had convinced many members on this, but perhaps not by this much. No member, including the US, spends 5% of GDP on defense. The biggest is Poland, with 4.12% of its spending going to defense. That's about $45 billion. Germany, with 2.12%, has a defense spending of approximately $75 billion. In percentage terms, Estonia, the US and Lithuania are also above the 3% mark. 19 other countries, including the UK, France, Germany and Netherlands, meet the 2% requirement as of 2024. But 9 others, including Italy and Spain, fall short of even the 2% mark. Come now to the picture on arms exports. The US accounted for 42% of global arms exports between 2019 and 2023. Russia and France stood at a distant second at 11%. China at 5.8% and Germany at 5.7% are other big guns. For the US alone, the total value of arms exports in fiscal year 2023 amounted to $238 billion. That's up from $205 billion in 2022. This is as per the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI. The numbers itself spell it out. The US has been the biggest gainer of the push for NATO nations to step up arms purchases. Is Trump's bid to raise that bar to 5% part of the same game plan? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Joachim Bitterlich is a former German ambassador to NATO. He's now joining us live from Paris. Mr. Ambassador, welcome to the show. Do you think Trump's demand is practical? We are talking about member countries raising defense expenditure to 5% of their GDP here.
I don't think it's neither realistic nor practical. I see this as a typical Trump who is provoking, pushing for more expenditure on defense. I understand it. And I think we have been underfinancing our defense in the last 20 years. This is correct. And please, Trump, to some extent, I understand him when he says, well, there's no protection without paying the bill. On the other hand, when you look at NATO expenditure of the member states for armament, a certain part is coming from purchasing in the US. And I think this is part of a burden sharing within NATO. If he said, well, the goal at the end is 3% by everyone, I understand it. I accept it. I've been defending this figure since now 2 years. I think it's correct, 3%. And this may be really okay. And at the same time, the Europeans should make it clear to Donald Trump, well, okay, we buy a certain part of our armament in the US. And therefore, this is part of our burden sharing. And please, under these circumstances, be realistic.
Mr. Ambassador, if you're talking about being realistic here, and you actually mentioned it, that the NATO is underfunded, but who is set to benefit from this proposal, if at all NATO agrees with Trump and implements it, considering some member countries cannot even raise 2% of their GDP towards defense spending?
I'm a bit astonished that some member states are still not able, let's say, to raise their expenditure up to 2%, as others do, France, Britain. Just a second, I have to stop here. Stop here.
All right, that is an ambassador.
Emergency. It was an urgency call.
Okay.
Okay, fine. You can come back. You stopped it immediately.
Are you good?
You stopped. I listen to you, okay, but you don't see me anymore.
No. I see you, Mr. Ambassador. You can continue. You can continue if you're okay.
Then it's okay. Please repeat your last question. I'm astonished to see certain member states not able, let's say, to fulfill at least the 2%. This is, let's say, underfinancing. It's clear. On the other hand, it's clear within NATO there are some who are more concerned than others. For example, the Germans, Poland, the Baltic states are more concerned, let's say, by Russian threat on the east, or by the risk of a Russian threat from the east than others, than, for example, Spain or Portugal. They are far away. But as a matter of fact, they should do more. And therefore, what Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, has said as a common goal, 3% for me is the right figure at the end of the day.
All right, Mr. Ambassador Joachim Bitterlich, thank you very much for making time for us and for talking to us. Thank you.
A pleasure as always.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.